Good day, everyone. I hope you're doing well. Today we'll explore the honeymoon journey of Tu Diep and James in Dalat. Not a story about luxury, but about quiet healing, slowing down, and learning how to truly stay after the wedding ends. What happens when love stops performing and starts resting? Stay with me and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter of this story. The honeymoon of Tu Diep and James in Dalat begins not with excitement, but with a deep, long exhale. After the wedding ends, after the congratulations fade, after the noise slowly dissolves, they leave the city together. They sit side by side in the car, close enough to feel each other's presence without needing to say anything. There are no schedules, no expectations, no roles to perform anymore. James is no longer the groom standing in front of a crowd. Tu Diep is no longer the bride holding a practiced smile. In this moment, they are simply two people who have walked a long road and are finally allowed to rest. Tu Diep leans her head gently against James's shoulder. It's a small gesture, almost unconscious, but it carries a quiet truth. She feels safe enough to let go. James notices it, his grip on the steering wheel softening. For the first time in a long while, he isn't thinking about what comes next. He isn't planning or calculating. He's just here. And for both of them, that feeling alone already makes the trip worth it. As the city fades behind them, Dalat appears slowly, like it never rushes anyone. Pine-covered hills roll gently into view, wrapped in thin layers of mist. The roads curve instead of cutting straight, inviting drivers to slow down. James instinctively eases off the accelerator as if he's afraid that going too fast might disturb the calm. Tu Diep notices this and smiles to herself. She realizes that James isn't just driving differently, he's living differently, at least for now. There's something about Dalat that doesn't demand attention. It doesn't shout. It doesn't impress. It simply exists, quietly confident in its softness. The air feels lighter. Even their breathing changes. Without saying it out loud, both of them feel the same thing. This city welcomes people who are tired. Their accommodation is a small wooden house sitting quietly on a hillside. It's simple, almost modest. No luxury, no grand design. Just wood, windows, and a view that stretches into a quiet valley. When they step inside, the space doesn't feel like a temporary stay. It feels like somewhere you could belong. Tu Diep is drawn immediately to the kitchen. It's small, a little old-fashioned, but warm. She runs her fingers along the wooden counter, imagining mornings spent there without hurry. James, meanwhile, is captivated by the porch. He steps outside and looks out over the valley, where layers of green overlap like soft waves. The silence isn't empty. It's full of things that don't need to be said. They exchange a glance and laugh lightly, realizing something at the same time. Neither of them feels like they're on vacation. It feels more like they've come home to a life they didn't know they were missing. Their first morning arrives without an alarm. Sunlight filters gently through the window, waking them naturally. For once, no phones buzz, no calendars dictate the start of the day. Tu Diep gets up first and quietly prepares tea. James opens the windows, letting the cool Dalat air fill the room. They move around each other effortlessly, like they've done this 1,000 times before. They don't talk much, and they don't need to. There's no awkwardness in the silence, no pressure to fill it. This is a different kind of closeness, one built not on passion or excitement, but on peace. It's the intimacy of two people who don't need to prove anything anymore. Later that morning, they decide to go to the local market, not because they need to, but because they want to. The market is lively but unhurried, filled with the colors of fresh vegetables, flowers, and warm bread. Tu Diep walks slowly, carefully choosing flowers, examining them as if each one matters. James follows behind, carrying the bags without complaint, occasionally teasing her for taking so long. To anyone watching, they look like a small family. Nothing flashy, nothing dramatic, just two people sharing ordinary moments. And somehow, those moments feel more meaningful than any grand gesture ever could. They return to the wooden house with bags full of simple ingredients. James insists on cooking lunch. He's not particularly skilled, and he knows it. But he's serious about trying. Tu Diep stands nearby, offering gentle suggestions but never criticizing. When he makes mistakes, she laughs instead of correcting him. The meal isn't perfect. Some dishes are slightly off, but it's warm, honest, and made with care. As they eat together, Tu Diep watches James closely. She notices something subtle but important. He isn't distracted. He isn't thinking about work or responsibilities waiting somewhere else. He's present, fully present. And in that presence, she senses that James is learning something new. Not how to impress, not how to succeed, but how to stay. That afternoon, they take a walk through the Pine Hills. There's no destination, no plan. They walk simply because the path is there. James begins to talk about his past, about the years he spent chasing work, ambition, and expectations. He doesn't sound proud, he sounds honest. Tu Diep listens without judgment. She doesn't interrupt or demand explanations. This isn't a confrontation. It's a quiet sharing of truth. As they walk, the past doesn't feel heavy anymore. It feels like something being gently set down. They stop on a patch of grass and sit side by side. The wind moves through the trees, brushing past them softly. No dialogue, just eye contact. James reaches for Tu Diep's hand and holds it a little tighter. It's not dramatic. It doesn't need words. It's a promise made in silence, one that feels stronger because it isn't spoken. That evening, they sit by the fireplace with cups of hot tea. They talk about small things, planting trees, maybe adopting a cat someday. Ordinary days filled with ordinary routines. Neither of them mentions big dreams or ambitions. Happiness in this moment doesn't look impressive. It looks simple, and that simplicity feels like enough. When night falls, it does so quietly. There's no celebration, no cinematic romance. Just two people lying side by side, listening to the sound of wind moving through the forest outside. Tu Diep whispers softly that she feels at peace. James doesn't respond, but his eyes fill with tears, not from sadness, from relief. For the first time in a long time, he feels like he's exactly where he's supposed to be. The next morning begins differently. Not because the world has changed, but because James has. He wakes up before Tu Diep, quietly slipping out of bed so he doesn't disturb her. The house is still, wrapped in early mist. He moves carefully through the kitchen, measuring coffee, boiling water, paying attention to every small step. It's a simple act, one he could have done many times before, yet somehow never did. When the aroma of coffee fills the space, it feels like a quiet declaration. He wants to be here in these small moments, not just the big ones. Tu Diep wakes to the smell and steps out onto the porch, wrapped in a light sweater. James hands her the cup without saying much. She looks at him for a second longer than usual, noticing the calm in his expression. It's a small detail, almost insignificant, but to her it signals something important. This isn't effort driven by obligation. It's care that comes naturally. In that moment, she realizes James isn't just playing the role of a husband, he's growing into it. They stand together, watching the mist slowly lift from the valley. The world feels quiet, as if it's giving them space to breathe. James breaks the silence, not with a dramatic promise, but with honesty. He tells her he won't make big vows about forever or perfection. He won't promise things he can't control. Instead, he promises something smaller but real, that he will stay when it's hard, that he will be present when it matters. Tu Diep listens, then nods. For her, that promise is enough. She's learned that love doesn't need to be loud to be true. They spend the rest of the morning wandering through Dalat, stopping wherever their curiosity leads them. A quiet cafe tucked between old buildings, a narrow path that disappears into trees, a small bookstore where time seems frozen. There's no rush to see everything. They aren't collecting memories for display. They're simply letting moments happen. At lunch, they sit by a window watching people pass by. James notices how ordinary everything feels, and how extraordinary that ordinariness has become. In the past, he might have found this boring. Now he finds it grounding. He realizes that peace doesn't come from escaping life, but from finally choosing how to live it. In the afternoon, they return to the wooden house. The light shifts, casting long shadows across the floor. Tu Diep tidies up the kitchen while James steps outside again, drawn to the porch like before. This time, instead of just looking out, he reflects. He thinks about the version of himself who once believed success was measured by distance, how far he could go, how much he could achieve. Sitting there now, he understands something he missed for years. Real fulfillment doesn't come from moving forward endlessly. Sometimes it comes from staying. Tu Diep joins him, resting her head lightly against his arm. She doesn't ask what he's thinking. She doesn't need to. The quiet between them feels complete. They've both learned that love doesn't require constant reassurance. It grows stronger in shared silence. As evening approaches, they prepare dinner together. This time, James is more confident, moving with ease instead of hesitation. Tu Diep helps without directing. They work side by side, occasionally brushing hands, exchanging smiles. It feels natural, unforced, like a rhythm they're slowly learning together. After dinner, they sit outside, wrapped in blankets, watching the sky darken. The stars begin to appear, faint at first, then brighter. Tu Diep talks about the future, not in terms of milestones, but moods. She hopes for days that feel light, even when life is heavy. She hopes they'll choose kindness when it's easier to choose distance. James listens carefully. He doesn't interrupt or rush to respond. When he finally speaks, he admits that he used to think love was something you earned after becoming someone impressive. Now, he understands that love is something you protect by staying open, even when it's uncomfortable. The night deepens. The forest hums softly around them. There's no sense of urgency, no feeling that something is missing. For the first time, James doesn't feel like he's running toward the next chapter. He feels like he's inside it. Their final morning in Dalat arrives quietly. They pack slowly, deliberately, as if speed might break the spell. Tu Diep folds clothes carefully. James checks the house one last time, making sure nothing is left behind. Not just objects, but moments. Before leaving, they stand together in the doorway, taking one final look. Neither of them speaks, but both know this place will stay with them. As the car rolls back onto the road, Dalat gradually fades into the distance. There's no sadness, no dramatic farewell, just a gentle understanding. They aren't leaving peace behind. They're taking it with them. James drives steadily, his hand resting lightly on Tu Diep's. She looks out the window, watching the landscape change, feeling calm rather than reflective. She knows life will return to its usual pace. Responsibilities will come back, challenges will follow. But something fundamental has shifted. Peace, she realizes, was never about a destination. It was about a decision. As they continue down the road, neither of them feels the need to talk. The silence isn't empty. It's full of trust, of shared understanding, of a future that doesn't need to be defined in advance. They don't know exactly what comes next, and for the first time, that uncertainty doesn't scare them. The honeymoon ends, but something deeper begins. Not excitement, not passion, but a steady, quiet commitment to choosing each other, not just in moments of joy, but in the everyday rhythm of life. And that, they both know now, is the kind of love that lasts. The honeymoon of Tu Diep and James in Dalat is not about travel, but transformation. After their wedding, they leave the city exhausted yet relieved, finally free from expectations. In a quiet wooden house among pine hills, they relearn how to slow down. Simple routines, morning tea, shared cooking, walking without destinations become moments of healing. James reflects on years spent chasing ambition, while Tu Diep listens without judgment. Through silence, small gestures, and honest conversations, James learns the meaning of staying, not escaping. He offers no grand promises, only presence. As Dalat gently holds them, both realize peace is not tied to a place, but a choice they make together. When they leave, they carry that calm forward, ready to face ordinary life with patience, commitment, and a lasting love that will guide them forward in life.